Hello, and welcome to the Banff at Altitude podcast, celebrating 50 years of adventure storytelling from the Banff Centre Mountain Film and Book Festival. Since its beginning in 1976, the Banff Centre Mountain Film and Book Festival has been a gathering place in celebration of all things mountain culture. The yearly festival, hosted at Banff Centre for Arts and Creativity, fosters an appreciation of the world's mountain places by creating opportunities for people to share and find inspiration in mountain experiences, ideas, and visions. Over the years, we've spoken to hundreds of incredible adventurers who share their spectacular and moving stories. My name is Joanna Croston, and I'm going to be digging through our festival archives to revive some of our favorite presentations from the past to get you stoked for what's to come in 2025, our 50th anniversary. And well, hopefully you'll be stoked for life in general. In continuing with this tradition of sharing stories and connections, we hope this podcast will inspire you to explore, preserve, and enjoy the great outdoors. Jimmy Chin is no stranger to the Banff stage and screen, with a resume of films such as Meru, Free Solo, The Rescue, and Wildlife that have all been finalists and award winners at Banff. Chin started climbing in college, embracing the dirtbag life before picking up a camera and kicking off his photography and film career. His long list of accomplishments includes being part of the first American team to ski from the summit of Everest. He also made the first ascent of the Shark's Fin on Meru Central and won a National Geographic Photography Award in 2019. As a filmmaker, he also received an Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature for Free Solo, which he co-directed with his wife, Elizabeth Chai Vasarhelyi. Chin joined us in Banff in 2015 and had a fascinating conversation with writer David Roberts about his career and passions. Here are Jimmy and David. Enjoy.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Roberts. I'm here to interview Jimmy Chin, adventurer, filmmaker, explorer, climber. Jimmy, good to see you again.
Hey, great to see you as well, David.
Nice to be able to talk to you in this context. So.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Well, you deserved all this, all your kudos so far. You know, you're known as both an adventurer, climber, explorer, and as one of the best filmmakers of that, and photographers going anywhere in the world right now. But which came first? Obviously, the climbing, the adventure was first.
Yes, it was.
Explain that a little.
Well, I grew up in Mankato, Minnesota, which is not exactly the hotbed for alpinists or climbers, but I felt like I was really bored a lot. And I mean, Minnesota's beautiful, but I knew something was missing. So I started skiing really young, and that was probably the thing that brought me into the outdoors. I grew up also swimming, racing, and competitive swimming and martial arts and playing the violin, which were all these things that my parents wanted me to do. But my reward was to go skiing. And then I discovered climbing in college, so late. But once I discovered it, I dove in completely. And
you went to Carleton College.
Yeah.
There's not much climbing around Carleton, is there?
Just the buildings. So I would drive up to Red Wing, Minnesota, and I actually discovered climbing in Joshua Tree.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, it was as much the lifestyle and kind of the attitude and everything surrounding it as much as the climbing. But I was completely driven by climbing more than probably anything else in my life. And I took a lot of the things that I learned from swimming and martial arts and focus and training and applied it towards the climbing. And so I left school, I finished college, I studied international relations, Asian studies, and I moved into my car, blue Subaru Loyale, for 7 years.
Wow. What years are we talking about?
97 to 2000, I guess it would be 2004.
So during those years, did you have a sense of what you wanted to be when you grew up?
I knew only that it almost wasn't a choice whether or not I was going to climb or not.
Yeah.
Right when I finished school, I went to San Francisco and, started applying for jobs. And then that lasted for about a month. And then I was getting a call back for a job at an environmental NGO. And then a friend from Mammoth called me and said, hey, the biggest storm of the century is about to hit California. And I drove out to Mammoth and then kind of just couch surfed for the next 7 years.
Well, what were you doing with respect to the storm?
I wanted to go skiing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so it was a huge year, and then I essentially spent my time living in Yosemite and Red Rocks and Joshua Tree and the deserts of Utah, and then I was teaching at Knowles for a while, guiding skiing. I was shoveling roofs in Jackson on the mansion tops, but I wasn't thinking about being a photographer at all. I was just trying to make it work as a climber, and I was paying my dues in the valley. But there was one point when I decided, and this is before I became a photographer or even picked up a camera, when I decided that if I was going to actually really be a serious climber, I was going to go as far as I could possibly go. I knew I had the ambition and drive for something, and I didn't know where it was going because I had a lot of pressure to put it into like law or something else, And that was challenging because I had a lot of pressure from my parents, and that was hard to kind of push that aside and really focus it into the climbing. And once I did that, I put everything into it.
Well, how did you get into cameras and filming?
I decided that if I was going to be serious about climbing, then, I needed to look beyond Yosemite. And for me, it was Pakistan, the Karakoram. For some reason, I was obsessed with the Karakoram because I thought that's the penultimate level of climbing. If you go from Yosemite and you can climb El Cap, then, the place to really test yourself was in the Trango Towers or the big alpine rock walls. So I put together an expedition. I got a grant from the American Alpine Club, and I sold like 500 T-shirts. I did a drawing on this shirt and had them printed, and I put together a trip and decided I was going to Pakistan. But I should jump back for a moment because you'll probably appreciate this. When I decided I was going to go to Pakistan, I had read a story about Galen, Rowell, Conrad Anker, and Peter Croft about going to this place called the Sharakusa.
Right.
And that to me looked like the dreamland of climbing. I had no idea how to put together a trip or how to go to Pakistan or what the logistics would be like. So I decided that I would go meet Galen Rowell. And I still remember it because I was in Jackson and I went climbing with my girlfriend in City of Rocks, broke up with her there, and drove to Berkeley, straight to Galen's office. And, they're like, hi, can we help you? It's his gallery.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm here to meet Galen. They're like, do you have an appointment? And I said, no. And they're like, well, he's really busy. He just came back from some expedition, and there's all these editors he's working with. And I was like, that's fine. I just need 10 minutes of his time. And so I waited there all day Monday, and I never got to see him. And they said, come back tomorrow. And I think they thought I would leave, but I didn't have anything else to do, so I stayed, came back on Tuesday, came back on Wednesday. I basically came back for 5 days straight.
Wow. And
on Friday afternoon, Galen came down the stairs and pointed at me and said, you must be Jimmy. And I said, yep, I'm Jimmy. And he said, why don't you come upstairs? I'm going to give you 2 hours of my undivided attention. And I went up to his office, and he brought down all these trays of these slides from the Sharakusa, because I said I wanted to learn about the Sharakusa. So he gave me a slideshow and showed me all these different towers that hadn't been climbed and explained to me how you put together a trip to go in there, introduced me to Nazir Sabir through giving me his contacts, said he would vouch for me, how much it would cost, and then even gave me an objective. He said, this thing is probably like the prime objective in that valley.
So waiting 5 days was the trick.
Yeah. And he said, you're going to do well waiting out storms if you can sit here for 5 days.
That's sort of how Galen broke in. Same kind of
Oh,
big-headed
really?
determination. It's another
Probably.
story, but
Yeah.
I got a great story about Galen
Oh, I'd love to hear
getting
it
into
sometime.
American photographer.
Ah.
Same sort of way. Except he was a little more aggressive.
Oh, really? That's good.
Galen was very aggressive.
Yeah, he was.
Did that lead directly to your trip with him and Conrad?
It
Or-
didn't. I was training for that trip when my good friend Brady Robinson, who you might know, he's the executive director
Yeah.
of the Access Fund now. We put the trip together, and we were climbing on El Cap. I think we were doing some heinous aid route on the right side of El Cap, but he wanted to be a photographer. And so he'd bought a camera, and then somewhere on the route, I was like, hey, let me see that thing. And he showed me how to shoot the camera, and we actually topped out. And the next morning, I got up and I picked up his camera and I took a shot with it. He went on to try to sell his photos from the last month in Yosemite, and then he sold one, and it was the photo that I took, which Galen had said, hey, if you go here, you cannot go here without a camera. So I took that money and I bought a camera.
Wow.
And that's how it started.
So you started with still. And Rebecca Martin told me just now that when you went on that crazy desert trip with Galen and Conrad, you were reading the instruction manual for the
Oh, yeah.
film camera on the plane over.
Yeah.
Explain what that
That's true.
expedition was about. And
That was really interesting because I did 2 trips to Pakistan, and then on the third one, I had met Conrad, and he said, hey, can I come with you guys? Because we wanted to go climb K7. And I was
Right.
like, you want to come with us? And he was like, yeah. In fact, if you let me come with you, I'll have the North Face pay for the trip. And Brady and I were like, well, that seems like a pretty good idea. Well, actually, I said, well, I can't say yes until I talk to Brady, even though, and I called Brady, and he was like, of course. And so, so I had that trip with Conrad. The next
we're talking about
year-
Conrad Anchor for those
Yes,
who don't
Conrad
know.
Anchor. And we had an unbelievably challenging time on K7. We got hit by a huge storm, and we were stuck on the wall for, I think we were on that route for 16 days.
Wow.
But I think we got a pretty good partnership out of it. You know, those kind of trips, where if you come out of it well, then you've got a partner for life. If you come out of it not well, then you never speak to the guy. So it turned out pretty well. The next year I went and tried to do the North Face of Everest with Stephen Koch. And then the following year, Conrad said, hey, do you want to do this trip with us to Tibet with Galen and Rick Ridgway? And I was like, blown away, and it was for National Geographic, of course. I was
And explain what
pretty
the
suspect.
purpose of the trip was for those who don't know.
Yeah, so we were going to cross the Chang Tang Plateau, which in itself was kind of the adventure aspect. Not very many people, I think a few people had tried, but it
Yeah.
had never been done, unsupported. But the goal was really to follow the migration of the Shiru, which are, they also call them the Tibetan antelope. It was based on a study that George Schaller, who is an incredible, probably the preeminent biologist in ungulates and in all kinds of large mammals. And the goal was to find out where these Shiru, where their birthing grounds were, because he'd been tracking them on multiple expeditions, and they were going almost 500 miles to some part in the northern Chang Tang Plateau, which is basically like the northwestern part of Tibet.
But nobody had found their
And nobody had
camping
found it.
grounds,
And
yeah.
he had tried to go from one side and come from the other, and he had basically a couple disastrous expeditions trying to find this thing. And so Galen, Rick, and Conrad, and originally David Brashears, the filmmaker, were going to do this trip. David had to bail out. And
That's how you became the filmmaker.
Right. And so when Rick called me, he introduced himself and he said, so the one catch is that you're going to have to film the trip. And before I could even say, I've never filmed before, and he said, you're taking the place of David Brashears, who obviously had just done like the big Everest IMAX
The IMAX film,
and,
yeah.
you know, and I was pretty honest. I said, hey, I've never filmed, and I don't know if I can take David's place, you know, but I'll do my best. And I still remember he just said, commit and figure it out. And then we got on the plane, and, you know, I had the instruction manual to this camera, which I'd never used before. And I was on assignment to shoot, a feature piece for National Geographic without ever having picked up a camera. So that was pretty
And that's
exciting.
the trip where you dragged those ridiculous cart.
Yeah,
things.
Ridgway designed these rickshaws with like mountain biking tires, and
Right.
because we couldn't carry all the weight that we needed for a 30-day expedition, we were probably going 400 miles or so, and the average altitude on the plateau is like 17,000 feet.
Wow.
So, we went over some 19,000 foot passes.
And you're man-hauling these things.
And we're hauling them, and they're 200, 250 pounds.
Oh, man. It absolutely sounded like a miserable trip.
It was absolutely awful. But the thing is collectively between Conrad Galen and Rick Ridgway, they probably had, I don't know, 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 expeditions between them. So I kept my mouth shut and I just tried to carry my weight and do what I was told. But Rick was just the incredible mentor, He basically taught me everything about filming on that trip that I still use in terms of storytelling and what I need to think about. But we crossed the Chang Tang following this migration. I got to see Galen, who was my original inspiration to be a photographer, an adventure photographer, because I didn't even think about it until I really met him. I got to see him work shooting an assignment for National Geographic, which nobody can teach you that stuff
Right.
in school. You have to see it and you have to ask questions, and so I learned really how to shoot on both ends as a filmmaker and as a photographer. Like really learned how not just to take the pretty pictures and tell a story. And then I also saw what it takes to put together an expedition at that level, because really, without getting into details, the chances of us actually pulling that trip off in hindsight were so small,
Right.
And over the course of the expedition, I realized that it was only through that many expeditions and years of experience and preparation and their planning and how they approached problems and how they worked together and all these different things that allowed you to do something extraordinary. That lesson obviously is hugely invaluable.
And it worked for Geographic, so
Yep, and it was a feature story in the
Yeah.
Geographic.
even though you didn't find the calving grounds.
No, we found
Oh,
it.
you did find them?
Yeah.
Wow.
After 25 days, we find the birthing grounds.
How do you know they are the birthing grounds?
Because Schaller had gotten close, and we'd roll up over this pass into this valley, and all of a sudden, we were tracking, 10 here and 15 here, and it started being more and more Shiru, and then we pulled over this pass after like 20-some days, and there were thousands of them.
Wow. What a
And
moment.
the issue is that we had to get there when the front end of the migration had already been there for a few days so that they were calving. But we had to leave because we only had enough food to maybe spend 1 or 2 days there. So we had to nail it right on the head.
Right.
And when we got there that night, we had glassed the whole place and hadn't seen any baby shrew. And the next morning we got up and we finally saw some. And we spent that day shooting and the next day shooting. And then we knew that we had to get out because we had 100 miles to go and we only had a few days of food left and fuel. So we got what we needed. I had to get the shot of the baby shrew or else there wouldn't be a conclusion to it. So I got my shot, Galen got his shot, and we head out. And we have to cross the Kunlun Mountains over into Xinjiang with these rickshaws. And I remember we were on our way out. We'd been going and going. I remember we came up on this camel that was like bones, facing the other way. And we were laughing about what a great sign that was for us. And Galen and Rick and Conrad basically stopped and looked up at the biggest peak in the range. And they were like, well, when's the next time we're going to be able to climb an unclimbed 20,000 foot peak? And, that's when I was like, okay, I'm in a completely other league now. We're starving.
You didn't have climbing gear, did you?
We had hauled crampons and ice
really?
axes across the entire freaking Tibetan plateau. And I never thought we'd use them. And here we are starving. We'd all had lost like 20 pounds at that point.
Yeah.
And we still had like almost 80 miles to go. And they were talking about taking off and going and climbing this 20,000-foot peak. And we did. We went and climbed it. It took us 2 days. And then I took this one photo on the top of Galen coming across the ridge. And then, eventually we got picked up, got home. But, Galen passed away in a plane crash right after that. But the photo I took of Galen was my first 2-page spread in the magazine. And it was his tribute shot. So
was that when you sort of felt like you were beginning to have it made with National Geographic?
I don't think you've ever have
of course
it made
not.
with National Geographic. Rebecca Martin definitely mentored me through that. I'd say that my career is built from a lot of incredible mentors.
Yeah.
I mean, purely.
I'm going to jump around because
Okay.
Ed Viesters told, when we were writing our book on Annapurna,
Yeah.
he told me about you getting cerebral edema, or was it pulmonary?
Pulmonary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it on Choyu or
It was on
Shiship?
Choyu, yeah.
Choyu. And then basically, according to him, you wanted to keep going, and he sternly ordered you to go down.
Yeah.
I mean, you were so tough. You went, pulmonary edema or not, you wanted to still go for the summit. And he basically told you, no way.
Yeah.
And then you recovered and wanted to
Yeah.
climb Annapurna with him, which is Ed's last
Yeah.
8,000er. And he again said, no, you're not going higher than Camp 2 or something.
Yeah.
Is that true? Pretty
It's
much?
true.
Yeah.
And I was really, really devastated because I had yet to, I'd gotten schooled on the North Face of Everest and I learned a few things on that trip.
Yeah.
But, this was such an important thing. I'd climbed Everest with Ed the year before.
That's right, yeah.
With David. I felt really, really strong, and I prided myself in being able to keep up with the big boys.
Yeah.
And so getting sick for me was just awful. And it was a product of me being overambitious because I had done 2 expeditions back to back leading up to that trip. So
And didn't you come into the trip with a sort of a cold or a cough?
Yeah, so I was
Yeah.
pretty sick when I showed up in Kathmandu, and then we drove straight up to Choyu, and it was the biggest photo contract job I'd ever had by far. I was shooting for Microsoft, Rolex, Mountain Hardwear, and 10 different brands. I had a lot of pressure to make that shoot happen, and so I didn't take care of myself, and I was just shooting and running around. And then on our summit push, I got pretty sick.
But you wanted to go on.
Yeah, I was really sick, and I was trying to hide it from Ed because I was coughing up basically chunks of my lung, but I didn't want him to see it. And I had this little bottle that I was But then on summit day, I felt awful because it was Ed's acclimatization climb, and he didn't
For
get
Annapurna,
to,
yeah.
Yeah, so he didn't get to go to 8,000 meters, and then
But he'd already climbed Choyu, so
he didn't need to climb.
Veka Gustafsson could go on and
Veka
climb
did it, but
Yeah.
it was more he wanted to get to 8,000 meters so that
Right.
he could just punch it out.
So you felt like you were letting Ed down.
Yeah, on his 14th 8,000 meter peak, so.
But he was right, wasn't he, to send you down? Or
Yeah,
assist?
for sure. There's no way he could have. If I was Ed now and some kid was I'm going for it, I'd be no.
Do you think he was right to forbid you to go higher than certain height on Annapurna?
Yeah, because I think, in my mind, if I was going to think about it now, where I am now, and I brought someone up and he was sick on Choyu, you don't want to push that, you know, especially on Annapurna where you have to climb under the sickle. I think when you all of a sudden get a sense, okay, wait, I am kind of responsible for this kid. And what happened actually is they summited right before they were going to fly out. I thought, I'm going to stay and climb this with another team that was there.
Right.
And at last minute, they were like, are you, the helicopter's coming in. And I'm just and I decided not to go. Last minute, Charlie Mace was there and I was going to climb it with Charlie. I flew home, and the next day I found out that basically the sickle had released and taken out the entire Italian team behind.
And that's when the guy was killed with the falling ice, who was going for his 14th.
Yeah,
himself.
and it was right behind Charlie Mace.
Right.
Charlie saw the whole thing go down.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, well,
Wow.
I guess that was a good decision.
Jumping around even more,
Mm-hmm.
since we saw your presentation with Mark Sinnott and Hazel Findlay last night, which was terrific, you've now formed a real partnership with Mark on these crazy expeditions to little-known places.
Yeah.
And some of your best-known work has come from these really exotic adventures.
Yeah.
So can you describe how this sympathetic
It's-
relationship with Mark came about and how sustained it's been through now?
Yeah.
4 expeditions or something like that.
I got to know Mark through being on the North Face team, but
Right.
I'd known about Mark for years. The Northwest Face on the Great Trango Tower to me was just, people complain about what style and all the things that happened on it, but it takes a lot to decide you're going to go climb the biggest face on the planet. It's
Yeah.
a 6,000-foot face on the Great Trango. I always really appreciated what Mark had done, and I knew that he'd done these incredible routes in Banff. And so when I joined the team, I was curious about who he was. And
He invited you
he invited me on.
on the strength of what?
Well, he'd known that I put together a lot of trips, and we'd never climbed together before, but he's a writer and I'm a photographer, and so we had that going for us right off the deck. But my first trip with him is actually to Pitcairn Island.
Oh, I know about that one.
Yeah.
He's sold everybody on good climbing on Pitcairn.
Exactly. And it was just such an outrageous trip on so many levels. I was with Greg Child and
Yeah.
Kevin Thaw. And if anybody knows anything about those guys, that's quite the crew on a boat headed for Pitcairn. It's pretty hilarious.
And there weren't many cliffs on Pitcairn.
No, we called it the greatest boondoggle of all time. And Nat Geo had put a lot of money into it, and so did the North Face. But I started to get a sense of who Mark was, because he would just come up with the most outrageous ideas, and he can get people pretty fired up. And I got to see him work, and he was just he's obviously a really, really funny guy, but he's also extremely intelligent.
Well, he knows how to sell expeditions.
Yeah, but he's also kind of a scoundrel, and he's also
Right.
kind of a wild man.
Yeah.
So that trip, somehow we pull it off. It got published. None of us got fired, even though I think there was some question about whether or not we should still be working for National Geographic or the North Face after that trip. It just kind of became this thing where I think he knew I was also up for anything wild, because a big part of for both of us is to see the world, and experience the world, and we both have enough experience to know that wild and crazy experiences are the places where you learn the most about yourself, and you can change your entire perspective on the world in one trip sometimes, and just you're looking for those new experiences. So I would get these calls from Mark more than once a year, because he would have multiple ideas.
Right.
And he'd be like, hey, what do you think? And I'd be like, that sounds great.
So tick off, there was Borneo, Chad,
Yeah, we did.
Oman,
Yeah.
Newfoundland.
I didn't go on the
Oh, you went on
Newfoundland trip.
Newfoundland, yeah.
He's pitched a lot of trips that I couldn't go on,
Yeah.
but Pitcairn set the stage on a lot of different things. But then Borneo was a really extraordinary trip, and it was kind of Alex's first expedition, and that was also a great team. And it was a really hard trip, actually. Really severely overhanging wall and pouring rain at 14,000 feet. You don't think that there's a 14,000 foot peak on an island, but there is.
Yeah, I've climbed it by the tourist route.
Yeah,
So
and so the other side, that donkey ear side,
Yeah.
it's crazy. But
we're talking about Mount Kinabalu, and
Yeah.
the highest peak in Borneo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we got along on expeditions, and we get along outside of it. And then, he's been really hoping to write for the Geographic, and it was nice to finally do one with him for Oman. We'd been writing and doing stuff for other magazines, but
This is where you really first started working with Alex Honnold. So,
Borneo was.
yeah. Tell us what it's like to try to film with and work with Alex.
Yeah, well, Alex, when he first showed up in Borneo, it's kind of classic. This happens where a new athlete shows up and they're getting paid to climb, and they think they're getting paid to climb.
I'll make a movie.
And you soon realize that you're not getting paid to climb. You're getting paid to sell raincoats, essentially. So that doesn't always entail just climbing. And Alex was young, and I think he would agree, and it's fair to say he was pretty full of himself in terms of being a climber and a purist, and he had a very narrow view on what climbing entailed. He didn't really think Conrad was a climber or Kevin Thaw was a climber, because they climbed big mountain stuff, but they didn't climb 514 or, you know.
Right.
So he had this kind of like idea of what a climber was. And it hasn't shifted much,
No.
but I think he understands the challenges of big mountain, high altitude, that kind of climbing. Not completely, because he hasn't gone for it completely on the high altitude end, although he has been
The
on
Fitz Traverses
Yeah,
out there.
pretty impressive.
But you know, the Chad trip was transformative for him. Since we're writing a book together, he's told me all about.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it really awakened him to the plight of people in developing countries, and that's why he's founded his Honnold Foundation.
Right.
It's really that trip with you that was the turning
Well,
point.
that's interesting, because for a long time we talk a lot about politics and
Yeah.
policy and philosophy, and for a while he was like totally against like the welfare system and like didn't
Right.
want to, you know, he's like, dude, people should fend for themselves, and if you make it, you make it. If you don't, you don't. Like, tough luck. And I mean, I think I've seen a lot of changes in Alex. He's certainly much more media savvy these days, which, you know,
He was starting from zero. So.
he was, yeah, and I don't want to take a ton of credit for it, but there was like a training period where Mark and Conrad and Alex and Kevin and myself and, you know, where it was like, dude, buck up, you know, this is part of the job. And it was good, because I remember at a certain point on Borneo, towards the end of the trip, he was like, I'm going to go get water. And I was like, wow, you're going to go get water for the team? Like, that's great. And he just goes, I don't want Conrad to kick me off the team. You know, and I was like, all right, we're getting somewhere, you know. And then he's an only child, right?
No, he's got a sister.
He's got a sister, that's
Yeah.
right. Well, sometimes I thought he was an only child, but
He can act like one.
yeah. And he would throw these tantrums, and there was something buried in there that I'd seen when he would fidget and start to get,
Well, he can't bear not to climb.
Yeah.
To be climbing all the time.
yeah.
And
And
when
you
you're
try to stop
filmmaking,
him. Yeah.
you've got to do all kinds of other
Yeah.
things. I mean, like in Chad, you told me a couple of years ago about how he would just go off and solo these totally chossy towers,
Yeah.
and it just scared the shit out of the rest of you guys.
And I've gotten to know now, because I didn't trust necessarily his judgment at that time. Just because we're out there, and if something goes wrong, like, everybody's in it together, you know. And
Long way from rescue.
you're a long way from anywhere.
Yeah.
And so, obviously, I gained my trust over the years, and then I've shot with him a lot.
Yeah.
And he has become incredibly professional. You know, the way I see Alex is that he puts the same kind of effort and attention into all aspects of his life. The same focus and attention that he puts into his climbing, he puts into the other things that he does. And he realizes he's a professional climber, and I think that he's very thankful. He's appreciative, and he works really hard. I just shot a pretty big commercial with him that
I
ran
saw
during
it,
the
yeah,
World
it's
Series.
Tremendous. I saw your outtakes of that too, where you showed how, not your outtake, but your making of,
Yeah.
where you had to hang that crane over the edge.
Yeah. And
It's
then
good
we
stuff.
we shot a climber's cut of it, because I hated the commercial one. I always hate the commercial cuts. But
And
we had
for the audience, this is on which climb in Yosemite?
This was on Heaven, which is 512D. It's probably overhanging 40 degrees, 45 degrees.
And it's above a 2,000-foot drop.
Yeah, I mean, you'd hit the deck first, you'd bounce once, but then you're going
Yeah.
2,000 feet. But he basically, on demand, free soloed it twice. And I went into the shoot saying, I will never ask him to solo something for the camera.
You would have been happy to shoot him roped up.
I would have been totally happy to shoot him roped up. I'm never gonna, I don't want to live with the responsibility of asking him to solo.
Right.
And I never will. And really, for these kind of shoots, it's actually much easier and a lot less stressful if you're roped up, because then I can have him redo the moves, and I can shoot all my angles, and I can have 5 takes of one move, and I can get arty with it, and you've got a big commercial client, and you want a high production value. But if you solo it, you only get 1 take, and I certainly wasn't thinking he was going to do it twice.
He did it twice, didn't he?
So, but he knew, obviously, that soloing it, I would need at least 2 takes. I had multiple camera angles, and I had a lot of equipment up there that just the technology on it could fail at any given moment, just the stuff we were using.
It's a brilliant piece of film work.
Well,
it showed on the World Series.
Yeah, it played during the
World
World
clip
Series.
from it.
Yeah.
I don't want to just talk about Alex, because this is about you.
Sure, I can talk about it.
With all of this work, especially with Mark, do you ever feel like you're kind of relegated to the B team because you can't be pushing the climbing? You've got to be documenting the guys who are pushing the climbing.
Yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with my role because I love shooting as much as I love climbing. I mean, that evolved over time. It wasn't always like that. Well, first of all, everybody on the team knows that a big part of their career is going to be based on how good I make them look. So everybody knows that I have a job, and everybody helps,
I would say your job is harder than theirs.
I think sometimes it feels that way, but there are trips where I know that I'm pushing as hard as anybody else.
Yeah.
And I'm pushing the edge. Probably the most outstanding trips would be the Everest ski descent. I was much more comfortable on the mountain. That was my 3rd time on Everest.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, I was focused on alpine big wall climbing for a while, and then I moved to Jackson, and I was doing a lot of ski mountaineering, and then Stephen Koch had invited me. I had done 3 big alpine big wall climbing expeditions back to back, and I was a little bit fried on that. And I was like, all right, well, Stephen Koch, he's a big mountain snowboarder, and he snowboarded 6 of the 7 summits, and Everest was his last one, and he was really driven to ski or snowboard the north face of Everest, the direct north face. And he wanted to do it alpine style, and he wanted to do it without ropes or fixed camps.
Wow.
And no oxygen. So, when you're 28, you're like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. We're going to go for it. So we went to Everest. We trained really, really hard.
What year again?
This is 2002. And we were going to climb the Japanese couloir and then up through the football fields and up through the Hornbein to the summit. We were basically retracing Triolet's alpine-style ascent of the face. And we wanted to do it during the monsoon, which is when it's dumping, because we wanted the most amount of snow. Anyways, that trip was an incredible learning trip. We almost got wiped out several times. Spent 3 months staring at the 9,000-foot face. It starts at 20,000 feet, ends at 29.
Wow.
And that experience shaped how I looked at high-altitude climbing for the rest of my career, because you don't ever look at anything that big and that nasty and think about climbing it and skiing it alpine style. There aren't very many other things that you can look at that are more intimidating.
Right.
So, that's that shift in your scope of what you think is possible. Kind of like when you first climb El Cap, you're like, oh. When you first climb El Cap in a day, you're like, okay, you can climb 3,000 feet of climbing in a day. And it just shifts your perspective on what you think you can do or what you can do. So after spending a lot of time on that, and I felt like we could really have possibly pulled it off, it shifted my brain into oh, okay, you can do this kind of stuff. And that was my first trip to the Himalayas outside of the Karakoram. So then I went and climbed it in 2004. But this idea of skiing Everest was now in my mind, and I had failed on it, and I don't like failing on things. And so I started training a lot in the Tetons. And then when I got invited in 2004 to climb Everest with David and Ed Viesters, we went on a different route.
The South Col route.
Yeah. And of course, the whole time I was thinking, oh, is this part skiable? Is this part skiable? And by the time I got to the top, I was like, oh, this is all skiable. And I looked at the whole thing like a skier. I knew that you probably would have to rappel the
Hillary step, yeah.
But I thought that you could probably make jump turns around the north side and scoot around.
Wow.
And so I had it in my head that it was definitely skiable. And then Kit in 2006 called me.
Kit
Delorier.
Yep.
She's a incredible big mountain skier. She was 2-time world champion free skier.
Yeah.
But she had skied all of the 6 summits, and Everest was her last one. She invited me on the trip with her husband, Rob Delorier, one of the first North Face athletes as well. He's an incredible skier. And then we went and climbed it and skied it.
Great.
But we had to rappel the Hillary step.
Wow, that's an asterisk. Got to jump to a couple other things, one of which is you were People Bachelor of the Year one year.
Oh, jeez. You just had to say it.
Rebecca told me about that.
I know.
Did that come as a surprise?
Kind of. It was funny because I was so into climbing and being on expeditions. Like this whole other world of like being in People magazine was just, it didn't even
Not just
really
being in it, but Bachelor of the Year.
Well, no, I wasn't exactly the bachelor. I was one of
the adventure bachelors.
But yeah, and that's true because I was definitely a bachelor because the only people I spooned with were men in tents on the side of mountains. But
so did that bring all the babes around?
well, that's what's funny is that like I didn't get to enjoy any of the aftermath of what you might enjoy from something like that as a bachelor in your 20s because I spent the next entire year on expeditions.
Rebecca did tell me there was some scene where you were descended upon by would-be groupies.
Maybe.
You don't remember?
I don't remember.
Well,
I blocked
you're
it
married.
out.
You're married now, so
I am.
You're hors de combat.
Yeah, exactly.
I think of Meru as one of the great achievements of the 21st century, and the first ascent with Conrad and Renan Osterg.
Yeah.
After many failed attempts, not only by Conrad and you guys, but by some pretty great other international climbers.
Yeah.
And for you and Renan and Conrad to do the first ascent of this ultimate challenge and document it seems like a supreme achievement. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I would say that climb and Everest, skiing Everest, are probably the two, and the Chang Tang Plateau just because it was such a formative and incredible experience. But Meru was definitely by far the hardest climbing I've ever done. And, you know, I paid my dues on Everest, but Meru is a different type of thing. It took a lot to go back to it after our failure on 2008 because, you know, we barely got off of it in 2008.
Right.
And we were in a pretty bad way. But just to have this mountain that was Conrad's obsession and him being my mentor was a big deal. And it was Conrad's obsession because it was Muggs Stump's obsession.
Right.
And the Muggs was his mentor. So there was this kind of legacy that was tied to it. And, you know, obviously Renan had gotten into a really bad accident before the trip.
I want to get that story straight. Is it true that Conrad didn't know about the accident to Renan, or
He knew.
he knew about it, but
Yeah.
he didn't think Renan would be able to recover in time?
He didn't. So I'm finishing literally this week the feature
The film.
doc.
That's going to be great to see.
And John is a big part of it. He narrates a good part of it.
John Krakauer.
Yeah. And then Renan, he broke his neck. And it was awful because
Just
it
how many
was
months before the
6 months. 6 months before the trip.
expedition.
And
in a ski fall in
yeah, and I had
Wyoming?
brought him on the shoot with Jeremy Jones and Xavier Delru, two of the best big mountain snowboarders on the planet. And I knew he wasn't a great skier, but this was a huge job, and I wanted him to be on it. And then he fell during that shoot and broke his neck in 3 places, and bashed his skull in. And I was holding him for half an hour.
Thinking he could die.
I actually thought he was going to die.
Yeah.
And then we got him out, and he survived it. And then life flighted to Idaho Falls, and I spent 5 days with him and multiple surgeries. And then once I knew he was stable, I actually flew back to finish the shoot with Jeremy and Zav.
Cool.
And the next day,
But you
I got
assumed
caught.
he was out for Meru.
Yeah. Well, what happened then is literally 5 days later, I got caught in the biggest avalanche I've ever been in. And in an avalanche I definitely should not have survived. I mean, it was a massive Class 4
Where
avalanche.
was this?
It was in the Tetons.
Still, yeah.
So that shook me up pretty badly. And then, so going back to Meru, we were kind of like putting the pieces back together.
It's amazing you didn't both beg off.
Well, it was this crazy thing where I think Meru became, it was this thing that we could direct our energy towards in order to kind of like pull ourselves back together. So we went back and climbed it.
And it was still pretty touch and go, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I've seen some of the trailer, and it's a sufferfest.
It's really, it was pretty challenging. A lot of A4.
It's going to be a great film, I'm sure.
I'm excited to be finished with it soon.
So what have you got planned for the next 5 years? Or do you think that far ahead?
I've been starting to. It's moving more towards photography and filmmaking. And, the craft of it has become more and more of an obsession. And part of it is, I don't know if it's intentional or not, but, you start to try to steer yourself away from too many more big expeditions. And,
close calls.
Yeah. I mean, you just see enough things happen and have enough experiences where you start to weigh the rewards and the risks.
And you've got a baby now.
Yeah.
Does that change things?
It does. It definitely does. But I've been in this process from even before Marina. My baby's name is Marina. Just because, I don't know how much more I have to gain because I feel like I've experienced these things. I know how hard I need to push to do certain things, how hard these kind of objectives are, and I've done them, and I don't know how many more times I got to prove to myself. And there's so many more aspects to life that I enjoy. I've completely fallen in love with surfing as well, but photography and the creative life is really infinite, and you can cultivate that. And climbing and being an athlete only is going in one other direction, So,
well, you're at the top of your game right now, and you're top of the game in terms of worldwide filmmaking, I think. Adventure filmmaking.
Well, we'll see how this film goes, but I definitely enjoy the work, and there's the challenges of being a photographer and all the different aspects of photography that I love and filmmaking that I love. So,
well, I'm impressed with how modest you've stayed.
That's because I've gotten my ass handed to me so many times. Every time I thought I was actually kind of cool, I got beat down.
That's the ultimate lesson.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jimmy. This is
cool. No, it's an honor, actually, to have you interview me. I really appreciate it.
It's an honor to talk to you. I'm following everything you do, so.
Cool.
Keep it up.
Appreciate it.
It's good stuff.
Thanks.
Jimmy has certainly done a lot since this interview 10 years ago. We hope that you enjoyed this conversation, and we look forward to you joining us for the next episode. Join the festivities and help us celebrate 50 years of adventure stories at the heart of the festival here in Banff. Check out our website at banffmountainfestival.ca. This episode was produced by Anik C. and is a production of Banff Centre for Arts and Creativity. The theme music was composed by Jacques Blackstone. A special thanks to our audio engineer Ben Ewing and the production team at Banff Centre, as well as the folks from the Paul D. Fleck Library.